It starts so subtly that most people never notice it happening. In the beginning, everything feels effortless. There's excitement, curiosity, attention. Every conversation feels alive. But as comfort settles in, something dangerous creeps into the dynamic, the illusion of always having time. The human brain, according to psychology, is wired to normalize what's constant. It adapts. It stops reacting with the same intensity to what feels familiar. That's why we can hold something valuable in our hands and, over time, start treating it like it's replaceable. It's not arrogance, it's human nature. The mind assumes permanence where consistency exists. When someone shows up for us every day, without fail, our subconscious begins to label that presence as guaranteed. We start to believe they'll always be there, that they'll always forgive, that they'll always understand. It's called familiarity bias, the tendency to undervalue what we experience repeatedly, even if it's precious. But this illusion has consequences, because the moment we assume we have forever, we stop being intentional in the present. We respond slower, we care less, we give half effort, thinking there's always tomorrow to fix it. Yet psychology tells us something very sobering. Every small act of neglect chips away at emotional connection. Every later becomes emotional distance. Relationships don't collapse overnight, they erode quietly. One unreturned message, one dismissive response, one moment of taking someone's loyalty for granted. And here's where philosophy meets psychology. The Stoics often said that nothing truly belongs to us, not even the people who love us. Everything is borrowed, temporary, fragile. When we forget that, we stop showing gratitude. We live like love is renewable. But love, when unappreciated, doesn't vanish immediately. It fades. It starts to withdraw its warmth from where it's no longer received. You see, comfort is beautiful when it's mutual, but when comfort turns into carelessness, it becomes emotional blindness. We stop seeing the effort behind someone's consistency. The calls we once looked forward to become background noise. The gestures we once found special become expected. We think it's love getting boring, but really, it's us becoming numb to stability, and that's why psychology often warns us the most dangerous stage in any relationship isn't when there's conflict, it's when there's complacency. Because complacency creates distance without noise. No fights, no breakups, just a gradual emotional fading that one day becomes irreversible. So many people only realize the value of someone's presence when that presence turns into absence. It's not regret that hurts the most, it's recognition. Recognition that you had something rare and you treated it like it would always wait for you to notice. The truth is, we never run out of time all at once. We lose it minute by minute, moment by moment, until there's none left to reclaim. So remember, this permanence is a myth. Gratitude is the only thing that keeps love alive, because nothing dies faster than what we start taking for granted. Emotional detachment never begins with distance. It begins with disappointment, and not the kind that explodes into arguments or dramatic eggs. It's quieter than that. It starts the moment someone feels unheard, unseen, or unappreciated. Psychology tells us that the human heart doesn't shut down instantly. It shuts down gradually, almost protectively. The mind, when repeatedly hurt or dismissed, starts building emotional walls not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. Most people imagine detachment as a choice, but it's rarely deliberate. It's an emotional defense mechanism. When someone begins to feel that their effort, presence, or vulnerability isn't met with the same energy, the brain responds by conserving emotional energy. It's almost like an internal alarm stop investing where you're not valued. It's self-respect disguising itself as silence. In relationships, this is the phase most people overlook. They notice when communication stops, but not when connection starts fading. They see the withdrawal, but not the 1,000 moments that caused it, because emotional detachment doesn't start when someone walks away. It starts when they stop trying to be understood, when explaining themselves feels like shouting into an emotional void. And here's the irony the other person often notices too late. They start realizing something feels off. The same eyes that once searched for theirs now look away. The same voice that once sounded warm now feels measured. There's still presence, but the emotional current beneath it has changed. What was once alive now feels mechanical, and that's when confusion begins. Why are they so distant? Why don't they talk like before? But the truth is, the emotional bond didn't break that day. It had been weakening for a long time, one neglected moment at a time. Psychology calls this process emotional numbing. When the brain has been exposed to repeated emotional pain, it starts to dull sensitivity as a coping mechanism. It's not indifference, it's exhaustion. The person who once gave their all is now protecting what's left, and this protection often looks like coldness, when in reality it's a form of emotional self-rescue. The tragedy is that most people only begin to value the emotional connection after it's gone. They mistake silence for peace, distance for strength, when in truth, both are often symptoms of emotional burnout. Once detachment sets in deeply, it's hard to reverse, because the mind, once it learns peace in detachment, rarely wants to return to the chaos that caused it. Philosophically, this is one of life's hardest lessons that people don't stop loving overnight. They stop trying when love becomes one-sided. The silence you hear isn't emptiness, it's a boundary. It's a reflection of everything that went unheard. So, if you ever sense distance from someone who once cared deeply, don't rush to accuse them of changing. Ask yourself, what pain made them stop expressing what they once gave so freely? Because emotional detachment isn't a beginning, it's the ending we never saw coming. And by the time silence replaces emotion, it's no longer about losing them, it's about losing the version of yourself that they once felt safe loving. The most fascinating part of human connection is that it's not built only on words, it's built on energy. Before a person ever says, "I'm done," their energy says it first. You can feel it in the pauses, in the change of tone, in the absence of enthusiasm that once felt effortless. Psychology might explain this through nonverbal communication and emotional reciprocity, the subconscious exchange of energy that happens between two people. When one person stops giving, the other feels it long before they understand it. Energy, unlike words, cannot lie. It reveals what the mouth hides and what the heart no longer wants to carry. When someone used to text first and suddenly doesn't, when their laughter becomes shorter, their eyes less engaged, those are not random mood shifts. They are signals of emotional withdrawal, and the fascinating part, the other person's subconscious notices, even if their conscious mind denies it. We are all wired to pick up on emotional cues. Our nervous system literally mirrors the energy of those we are emotionally attached to. So what happens when the one who always gave starts to pull back? The dynamic of the relationship changes completely. The person who once felt secure suddenly starts feeling the void. That's when the questions start. Why aren't they calling like before? Why does their silence feel heavier now? But the truth is, the shift didn't start with silence, it started with imbalance. Energy, by its nature, seeks equilibrium. When one gives too much and the other takes too much, the universe intervenes through detachment. You can't keep pouring from an empty cup forever. Eventually, the giver realizes that love shouldn't feel like convincing, that peace shouldn't feel like a sacrifice, and the moment they withdraw their energy not out of anger, but self-preservation, a powerful reversal begins. The same absence that once went unnoticed suddenly becomes the loudest presence in the room. This is where psychology meets spiritual law. Every connection operates within energetic boundaries. When you neglect what once nourished you, you create an emotional deficit, and nature abhors imbalance. So, when one energy withdraws, the other begins to chase. The absence of what once felt guaranteed triggers an emotional hunger. It's not just about missing a person. It's about missing the emotional stability their energy provided. Philosophically, this is one of life's most poetic lessons, that love isn't sustained by words alone. It's sustained by consistent energy. You can't fake warmth. You can't mask indifference for long. Eventually, authenticity reveals itself through vibration, through how a room feels when that person enters or when they no longer do. When the shift of energy happens, there's no announcement, no closure. There's just a quiet understanding. The connection has changed frequencies, and no matter how much you try to replicate what was lost, it never feels the same, because energy doesn't lie, and it doesn't return to where it wasn't valued. So when the energy changes, listen. Don't wait for words to confirm what your intuition already knows. Silence is never empty. It's full of truth. There's a moment in every dynamic where the silence starts to echo. It's the same silence one person once created, now returning to them in perfect symmetry. Psychology calls this emotional mirroring, when the energy you project eventually comes back to you, not as punishment but as awareness. The universe, in its quiet intelligence, uses reflection to teach empathy. When someone constantly gives and the other constantly takes, imbalance becomes inevitable. But when the giver steps back, something powerful happens. The same distance, the same absence, the same disregard that once came from one side is now felt from the other. That's the mirror effect. It's life showing you your own reflection through someone else's behavior. Most people don't notice when they're being mirrored because they confuse consistency with permanence. They assume the same emotional warmth will always be there, even if they stop nurturing it. But human beings are not infinite sources of patience. Psychology shows us that emotional reciprocity, the backhand, forth of care, effort, and attention, is essential for connection. When reciprocity fades, attachment weakens, and the subconscious begins to rewire itself. And here's where the mirror becomes mercilessly clear. The same neglect once given begins to return. The same unanswered calls, the same lack of enthusiasm, the same emotional distance, they all come back, not out of spite, but as balance. Because emotionally, what we give becomes the atmosphere we live in. You can't keep sending out indifference and expect connection to survive. At first, the experience feels confusing. There's a quiet panic. Why does it feel different? Why aren't they reaching out like before? But it's not difference you're feeling. It's your own energy finally reflected back to you. You're being shown what they once felt when they were trying and you weren't noticing. That's the mirror at work. It doesn't attack, it awakens. Philosophically, it's a profound law of human relationships, the law of reflection. What you project emotionally will always find its way back. That's why emotionally intelligent people pay attention not just to what they receive, but also to what they contribute. Every relationship is an energetic ecosystem. What you feed it with attention, neglect, gratitude, indifference becomes its climate. This is why indifference is so dangerous. It might look harmless on the surface, but it's an emotional toxin that kills intimacy slowly. And when the mirror finally turns, when you start to feel the same emptiness you once caused, you realize something painful. It wasn't the other person that changed. It was the energy responding to your reflection. The mirror effect is not revenge. It's reality teaching you responsibility. It's showing that love cannot be one-sided and still remain alive. The very behavior you normalize becomes the standard of how others treat you. So if you find yourself facing silence where there was once warmth, don't just grieve the absence, understand the reflection. Because every unspoken truth, every ignored effort, every moment of dismissal eventually finds its way back home. Life always returns what you give, and the reflection is never distorted. There comes a point when the mind begins to crave what it once dismissed. This is what psychology calls reversal of perception, or more simply, psychological reversal. It's the turning point when what was once taken for granted suddenly feels priceless. It's not just about missing a person, it's about realizing the depth of what was once overlooked. The human brain, fascinatingly, tends to assign greater value to what is no longer available. Scarcity sharpens attention. The same consistency that once felt predictable now feels like security lost, and that realization hits with a different kind of weight. In relationships, this reversal happens quietly but powerfully. When someone who used to be available steps back, the absence activates what psychologists call the reward prediction error. The mind, used to a certain level of attention, now experiences a void, and that void becomes obsession. Suddenly, the smallest memories take on new meaning. The smile that once went unnoticed becomes unforgettable. The simple conversations that once felt routine now replay endlessly. It's not that the person changed, it's the perception that shifted. When something becomes scarce, our emotional system starts to associate it with higher value. That's why we often realize the importance of emotional safety only after we've lost it. The comfort that once felt ordinary now feels irreplaceable because the mind has finally connected absence with importance. Philosophically, this is one of life's most poetic paradoxes. Appreciation often arrives too late. Human beings, by nature, struggle to recognize value in abundance. We interpret effort as normal and loyalty as expected, until the silence of absence teaches us what presence truly meant. That's the power of reversal. It doesn't come to punish, it comes to awaken. It's the moment when reality confronts ego, and emotion finally outweighs pride. And what's even more revealing is that the person being missed usually isn't doing anything new. They're just not available anymore. Their absence becomes magnetic because it contrasts with their former presence. Energy that was once freely given is now withdrawn, and the mind can't accept the loss of what it once felt entitled to. That's how longing begins, not from love alone, but from the recognition of what can no longer be accessed. Psychologically, this shift is both humbling and transformative. It's life's way of showing us that connection thrives on gratitude, not assumption. Because once you're on the other side of detachment, once you're the one feeling the void, you understand what they once felt when they were giving without being seen. The mirror doesn't just reflect now, it teaches. And maybe that's the beauty in the pain, that missing someone isn't always about wanting them back, but about realizing the cost of emotional neglect. It's the mind's final attempt to reconcile what the heart refused to appreciate when it had the chance. Psychological reversal is the moment truth replaces comfort, when the absence you created becomes the lesson you needed. Loss has a way of becoming the greatest teacher, not because it punishes, but because it clarifies. Psychology says that emotional pain often serves as the brain's method of adaptation. It forces awareness. It makes us look at what we ignored, confront what we denied, and understand what we once refused to see. When someone realizes what they've lost, it's not just the person they miss, it's the version of themselves that felt whole in that connection. That's why loss feels so heavy. It's the collapse of an emotional identity that was once built around someone else's presence. In the beginning, there's denial. The mind keeps replaying memories as if repetition could rewrite the ending. There's bargaining. Maybe it's not really over. Maybe they'll come back. But what psychology teaches us is that grief in relationships isn't just about separation. It's about the death of a dynamic. The routines, the laughter, the emotional safety, they all dissolve, and the brain takes time to adjust to the silence that follows. That silence becomes the mirror of everything we didn't say, everything we could have done differently. And then comes the revelation that loss doesn't arrive to destroy you, it arrives to evolve you. It strips away the illusions. It shows you where you loved carelessly, where you listened half-heartedly, where pride mattered more than peace. It's in loss that emotional maturity begins, because only then do we realize that love is not owed, it's earned through presence, awareness, and effort. The philosophical truth behind this is simple but profound. Pain expands consciousness. You become more compassionate after being ignored, more attentive after being overlooked, more grateful after being abandoned. You start to see value differently, not in grand gestures, but in consistency, not in promises, but in actions. What was once taken for granted becomes sacred. This is the paradox of human emotion sometimes. It takes losing something beautiful to understand what real beauty is. The woman who once dismissed effort now understands its weight. She recognizes the difference between affection and investment, between attention and devotion, between having someone's time and having their heart. That's what loss does. It refines perception, and while it hurts, there's liberation in it too, because when the lessons are learned, you don't carry regret, you carry wisdom. You stop chasing closure and start creating understanding. You begin to value people in real time, not in memory. That's emotional intelligence, learning to honor presence before it turns into absence. So yes, loss is painful, but it's also purposeful. It teaches you how to love better, how to communicate clearer, how to show gratitude before it's too late. The woman who once took him for granted eventually learns that missing someone isn't weakness, it's awareness. Awareness of what love demands: attention, intention, and reciprocity. Because in the end, loss is never just an ending, it's life's most intimate way of reminding us to love consciously, before silence becomes the only thing left to hear.